Okay. Gonna read this a little bit afterwards. Now, I will say, my voice is already like a little parched because I have been, obviously I worked today. And I don't know if Pepsi Zero Sugar is necessarily the best thing for that, but that is what it is. What's in the news? The protests appear calmer. Nationwide protests persist, albeit with a slight repression and tension across some cities. Isolated incidents of violence were reported on Monday night in a few major cities, notably Deir and Latvian, amidst the prevailing unrest. In Deir, the hometown of the revered Circus, a massive memorial march saw tens of thousands of citizens taking to the streets in peaceful remembrance. However, as dusk fell and the crowd began to dwindle, there were instances of discord. Authorities reported that a fraction of demonstrators resorted to hurling stones and disregarding orders to disperse, prompting police action and resulting in arrest. Elsewhere, the protests in House of Sword and a majority of other significant urban centers seem to present a calmer facade, exhibiting fewer confrontation between civilians and law enforcement. As per data from the state press, authorities have made approximately 9,800 arrests nationwide in connection with the ongoing protest. Yet, as we observe the unfolding situation, it is crucial to remain vigilant and steadfast in our pursuit of peace and stability in these challenging times. Education privatization proven successful. Our editorial team immediately analyzed the SIPA report recently and revealed the the standards of education. We were curious to see how the policies of the last decade have begun changing the performance metrics. Lesbia specifically stood out with a jump of 6 positions, towards the 5th out of 68. After research and analyst collaboration with the Vice President of Magnus Cartas, the SMEA chapter leader of OMEC, we gained a critical insight of how Lesbia increased its educational quality. It boils down to 2 major points. One is the privatization efforts led by Prime Minister Alaves that led most of the schools in wealthier neighborhoods. 1,404 to be precise, to be privatized. This lifted a significant budget burden off the state because the wealthy paid for a great education for their kids and were still taxed reasonably in order to divert funds to state schools elsewhere. The second major factor was the allowance of minor cultural or curricular changes to privatization. Minor curricular changes for private institutions that led to major improvements in the student participation, teacher happiness, and boosted the performance of the institutions. All in all, the improvement of the system and a massive amount of 34 billion lira it raised for Lesbia made it a lucrative option. Poland desperately needs more capital to tackle the recession, and when education is privatized foreign capital, it will also aid in establishing quality schools. The Vice President of Magnus Cartas pointed out that the SIPA report doesn't include access to education metrics and that Lesbia has inequality problems. The statement hasn't been proven with any statistical research from OMEC, which is why it must be taken with a pinch of salt. The administration could be practical about this term and look to its southern example on how to do positive change, even though opposition from the Minister of Education is expected. Okay, there are 3 radicals going crazy. They've got 3 news reports today. Looking at our history of everything wrong in our country, there's only one figure that everybody points at: Tarkin Sol. He has devolved our country into something much worse than what it was before. He has committed crimes against humanity. We also remember the Izian incident and the wounds that have been inflicted on the hundreds of thousands of people of Bloodish ethnic background. We have been calling for his trial, and we believe it is time for the government to open up ways for a fair trial by removing the undemocratic and absurd laws to protect him. It is time that the Constitution of 1929 that protects Sol be changed. People are still waiting for a fair trial, for justice to be served, and for their questions to be answered. A shocking misogynist rally. Every day we are appalled by how deep the roots of misogyny goes in our country. We are appalled again when yesterday, during the protest by the League of Sordland Women, counter-protesters showed up to disrupt the peaceful rally. In the resulting scuffle between the police, the protesters, and the mob, many were arrested from both sides. Road to change is filled with real obstacles, but we have said it before, we can do it. On this chat, in this stream, on this channel, we love women. We support women here. Labor Union Rights March. A large group of labor union members gathered around the city of Ageland to protest against the poor conditions of workers' rights in Sordland. People could be seen holding signs, pleading for accountability, and basic rights in corporate work environments. Dozens of tourist workers were in the midst of the crowd. One worker was heard saying, "I know the law gives us nothing on paper, but is this the reality that we choose to accept?" Others pointed out that the country isn't relying on the workers to stop the recession, but doesn't give them anything back. Look at how great the rights are in Vagland. Minimum wage, overtime pay, safe working regulations. It's time for real workers reform. The time for real workers reform is now. One voice demanded in frustration. We've had an opportunity to interview some open-minded managers from corporations. They relay that the companies have little to no oversight. It's hard to disagree that the time for labor reform is long due. Albin Clavin, of the reformers wing of the USP, has seen the potential and announced that it will work to begin to explore what can be achieved. Will President Rayne listen to these demands? Time will tell. Okay, so you are now halfway done. It looks like it's doing pretty okay, as far as I can tell. What about our trade talks? Quarter of the way done. I mean, that might seem like more of a third of the way done. Young Ysor's suspected of terror attack. At approximately 1646 on Monday, a terror attack occurred in Vestshort city center during a rally by the left-wing CPS. The attacker, suspected to be working with the Young Swords or another organization connected to them, opened fire with an automatic rifle in the protesting civilians. 17 people were killed, including the attacker, who shot himself afterwards. Witnesses testified the rifle was hidden behind a newsstand. Okay. And I think... No, we got something in Hallersword. Reports on reforms. Franz Richter, leader of the PFJP, recently outlined their demands for the reform package. He declared that without the implementation of term limits and limited decrees, it would be very difficult for him and his party to stand behind the reform package. Okay. Oh, no, I want to go back. Go back here. Let's go see what's going on in Narbell. I arrived at the meeting room for my talk with Sierra and Pascal. Before beginning, I took a moment to appreciate the view of the balcony. The mountains of Narbell were completely covered in snow. While I was mesmerized by the scenery, Pascal, Blal, are you the minister? You're the Minister of Health. Have we even met you yet? He walked up to me. My Minister of Health was, ironically, still not poorly, having gained a few pounds since his breakthrough as a best-selling writer. But his authority on social affairs could not be questioned. Such a spectacular view. Syria Walda, the Minister of Education, joined us in the balcony, dressed in a sky blue pantsuit. Her preference for trousers over dresses made her the subject of much palace gossip, but didn't seem to bother her in the slightest. Spectacular indeed. But if you look in the opposite direction, you'll see what Seoul's decades of neglect did to this city. Make Sordland healthy again. Look, okay? He's a best-selling author, okay? Of public health stuff, okay? To compare him to RFK Jr. is an insult. It's an insult to RFK Jr. This man has never had a single worm in his brain, okay? God fucking damn it, man. Didn't bringing this shit in my chat. Okay. And also Sierra is wearing a pantsuit, so obviously she's Hillary Clinton. Anyway, let's go on. Most of the people living in Narbell are workers, farmers, and their wives and children. Aren't most people living in every city workers, farmers, and their wives and children? They're breaking their backs for close to no pay, all thanks to greedy corporations. Okay. You know what? My intention is to help the working class. I'm glad we can see eye to eye on the issue. One of my favorite things in Suzerain, and I understand why they did it this way, but I think it's so funny that your like ministers are like from completely different wings of the party, right? Like you've got like the left wing Sierra, and then you have the oh, what's her name? The one who's like a big soulist, which I don't. What's her name? Yeah, the Home Secretary, which I can't remember what her name is. The cabinet. Elias Graf. It's like we kind of, yeah, we just have like people from all over the whole spectrum out here, okay? We really are a big tent. Okay. If you look past the view, you can see the real problems. Real problems like poverty. Pascal nodded gravely. This was a subject he knew quite a bit about himself. His best-known books were about the plight of Sordland's less fortunate, drawing from his own past growing up in squalor. Well put, Mrs. Walda. I don't need to tell you about my own experiences with poverty, and I'm sure you have similar stories. Am I right, Mr. President? We have all gone through difficult times. True, but some of our lives are more difficult than others. Like ours was, and still for hundreds of thousands in Sordland. You don't have to have been born poor to sympathize with the plights of the impoverished. Much as you don't have to be born a woman to recognize Sordland's need for parity among the sexes. Parity among the sexes shouldn't be our first priority. Look how many high-ranking female politicians our country has. Exactly. Like, you think I put up a glass ceiling up there for no reason? It's to let in the sunlight. If you broke it, there's going to be broken glass on the floor, and we're going to step on it. That doesn't help anybody. Appearances can be deceiving, Pascal. Her voice sounded bitter. Think about how Leah's Graf got to her current position. I don't necessarily believe the rumors about her and Seoul, but she never could have risen so high if she didn't parrot his causes. Gloria Tori, is it an accident that the first female assembly speaker is such a staunch conservative? You know what? I have been thinking about this. I've thought about this before. Like this exact sentiment, because what's interesting about this is that, like, in Canada, where I currently live, and I've always lived, we've had one female prime minister for like 4 months in like 1995. She was a conservative woman, Kim Campbell. And then let's say in the UK, they've had what, like four female prime ministers? Thatcher. They had Theresa May. They had the one that killed the Queen. The other ones, I don't remember what they're. There's one more. But what's interesting about that? They've had 3 or 4, and they've all been conservative. I would put good money. Maybe not good. I put like a few bucks into it. I would bet decent money that the first president of the United States, I feel pretty strongly about this, is going to be a Republican. That's my gut feeling, is that the first female president is going to be a Republican. For sure. I don't know who it's going to be. But that's my feeling. Better not be Sarah. No, I don't think. Does Sarah apparently even do anything? She's not a senator anymore, right? I don't know what she's up to. Anyways. And then there was Alfonso's habit of promoting women to prominent positions to give Sordland a progressive sheen, while accomplishing nothing in reality. While women in places like Narbell were denied any opportunity to advance, the government can use a handful of female politicians from wealthy families, myself included, to pretend their only obstacle to success was their own lack of initiative. Meanwhile, those of us who don't use our clout to help powerful men stay in power are denigrated as angry spinsters. I ask you, Mr. President, does anyone care that your strategist, Mr. Glade, doesn't have a wife? I agree with you completely. Sordland's women deserve better. I'm glad to hear that. As I was saying, this isn't about Hollisord addressing this country's real issues. Rather than bowing to the wishes of the hawks and the fearmongers and establishment, and diverting yet more resources to the military and law enforcement, our welfare, healthcare, and education systems have been decaying since the recession. Sordland's poor communities are losing hope. Hopeless and a lack of opportunities can drive people to extreme situations or extreme solutions. We're seeing increased crime, domestic violence, and yes, rising inequality between men and women. We need to engage it holistically. The capital must be prioritized. Yes, let's engage this holistically. I'm planning on to help by using an increased budget to improve the quality of healthcare. That could prove useful, but we need to do it. We're doing a lot more. Education has similar issues. There is another subject that I want to mention. I've been working on improving the rights of workers in our country, and I proposed a draft bill that is currently being reviewed by our party. Mr. Clavin has already backed me and giving his support. Sordland has fallen behind most countries on the subject, and it is my responsibility to ensure that this is not the case. And you're what? You're Minister of Health? Improve standards, always room for improvement. You know what? Yeah, it's always there's always room for improvement, and I'm good to hear. I'm glad to hear that that you're pushing for it. I appreciate your kind words, Mr. President. I will not let you down. It's also a matter of life and death. Every decade we hear some horrific accidents due to employers' disregard for their workers' safety. So, will you back the bill when it arrives at your desk, Mr. President? I will be very interested in supporting it once it is finished. You need money? I have $2. You know, I can have -20. I have so much. I can go into so much debt, man. I'm gonna owe everyone trillions by the end of this. I'm relieved to hear that. He smiled. It's getting a little cold out here. Shall we continue our discussion indoors? We headed back inside. The meeting room was already prepared for state business. Small gifts for each of us had been placed on the table by the municipality, and we took our seats. Let's start with a health overview, Pascal. As you wish, Mr. President. Sordland has a free private healthcare system, except for a few private hospitals operating under it. Most of the populace receives adequate treatment. Health issues primarily appear in rural areas due to the lack of quality services. I'm doing my best to ensure that citizens of all ages receive the best healthcare that they can. I also personally want to solve our high infant and maternal mortality problem. What's life expectancy and mortality rates? Our life expectancy is 65 years old. The infant mortality rate is a worrying 121 per 1,000 is an insane number. That is a crazy number. What is it, right? Infant mortality rate. Go Canada, because that's 4.3. 12%. We're at 4.3 per 1,000 in Canada. In the USA, it is 5.6. So it's worse, but that's not a surprise. What about in Sweden? Sweden's always on top of the. Sweden's at 2. Fucking assholes. How dare they? Finland is always usually up there as well. They're also at 2. Who would even be a country that have like 121? What about, like, Algeria? I don't know, for example. Algeria is at 19.7. What about, like, Sudan? Sudan is at... okay, it doesn't give me, like, an easy answer here. 37. The Congo in the DRC. In the DRC, it's 44.5. So, again, that's, like, as poor, like, Somalia, it's 67. We're twice as many babies die in Sordland right now than they do in Somalia. We gotta fix these rates, man. Maternal mortality is at 5 per 1,000. I assure you that we're doing everything we can to save mothers and their newborns. Those numbers are saddening indeed. We must do everything that we can. We are working very hard on improving the quality of our services. How many doctors and nurses are employed? We have 31,594 doctors and 73,680 nurses working for the Ministry of Health. That's a high number, but I think is... I don't want to be rude, but out of those numbers, how many are in urban and in rural areas? That's a good point. Pascal? The data shows that per 10,000 people in urban areas, there's about 11 doctors, while in rural areas, there's only 3. Is a 2-to-1 ratio for doctors and nurses, like, reasonable? I feel like there should be, like, 10 times more nurses than there are doctors, but maybe I don't know the numbers too well. In other words, rural citizens with medical emergencies have to wait an embarrassingly long time before they're treated. How many hospital beds are there? There are 10 beds per 10,000 citizens. Compared to our neighbors, very good number. Our amount of beds is higher than in countries of Agnolia and Wayland, But we obviously can't match Lesbian and Vagland. Magnolia and Wayland should hardly be used as a standard, but it is good to know that we aren't in a massive health crisis yet. Thank you, Pascal. Your in-depth briefing is much appreciated. We only have 37 million people. Okay, education. Sword's education is free, but we have a very outdated system that I want to reform. My other important issue is a lack of access to education in rural areas, especially for young girls. Your administration has the power to solve both of these problems. My highest priority is to get enough funding for this, I need to fix this light or something, I don't know what's wrong with it. Is to be able to build schools in rural areas while I cleanse our education system of its nationalistic indoctrination and sexist teachings. How many students and teachers do we have? Currently, there are about 5 million students, 3 million in primary, 1 million in secondary, and 1 million in tertiary. There are 155,300... Once again, also, these are crazy rates. 3 million in primary, 1 million in secondary, and 1 million in tertiary. I feel like having... primary is obviously longer. It goes from kindergarten to grade 8. Secondary is, high school. Actually, maybe it makes sense. Never mind. Maybe these numbers are actually just fine. We have 155,316 teachers. Sordland is full of young and bright minds. Okay. I think there needs to be a change in what is being taught. We should help children to ask questions and educate themselves. What is the literacy rate in Sordland? The literacy rate of Sordland is at 80%. This is a very good indicator for future growth, but it needs to increase. And it's far lower among girls than boys. If I remember correctly, the most illiterate areas are in Bergia and Angland. That's correct. Out of Latvian skews the statistics for the Nargis region, which also has a vast number of illiterate citizens. This underlines my point about the lack of access to education. Okay, what about the difference between urban and rural? Urban areas have 3 times the number of schools per 10,000 people compared to rural areas. Rural areas also suffer from a lack of teachers. I can imagine teachers not preferring desolate areas for work. Salaries for teachers are very low here. We need to increase their pay to give them more incentive. Thank you, Sierra. I'll fill in the blanks from here. I believe that's everything. Sierra stood up and moved towards the window. She took a deep breath. What is it, Sierra? Look at this impoverished city. The streets are full of potholes, the hospitals barely function, the schools half open. It's not just about Seoul or even Alfonso failing. This decay in Sordland's forgotten regions have been going on for many decades due to the structural corruption which is fueled by capitalism. Targeting Seoul is more for the country. Let's not get into an ideological debate. We need to focus on the issues. You know, Pascal, what were your thoughts? What was your thoughts, Pascal? There's not much to be said, sir. I agree with Sierra, but it is also Gus Manager's job to improve these areas. It's a responsibility for each and every one of us. Sierra sat back down and sighed. One way or another, we need to change in Sordland. Greed and unchecked capitalism will not magically provide for the people. Okay, what are your plans, Sierra, then? My plans require an increase in government budget. I aim to solve the problem we highlighted with the allocated money. By building schools in these less fortunate rural areas, and through fundamental changes to the education system, I will unlock the potential for all of our children, boys and girls alike. See, money? What if we invaded our neighbors and take their money? Thoughts on this, anybody? Yes, I do. The rural areas suck. Just print money. Now you're thinking. Can we start Raincoin? Would anybody invest in Raincoin? I'm looking for a simple what's our max budget? A max 28 government budget point injection here. If anybody's willing to buy sword coin, it's going to go to the moon, okay? Imagine this graph, but like upside down, and that'll be your sword coin investments. Your neighbors are all basically more powerful than you, except Agnolia and maybe Wayland. We can invade Agnolia. Keep this in mind, okay? Investment in the future of Sordland. Imagine unlocking the full untapped potential of our youth, the knowledge and wealth that they will generate. Wouldn't a promotion of private education help create additional funds? Yes, but at what cost? I'm not a supporter of the private sector in education. At the end of the day, they're focused on profits first. What are you working towards, Pascal? I personally want to improve the low quality of healthcare in the rural areas. I got like hair coming into my eye. So I created draft plans to increase the salary of doctors and to upgrade the equipment of the hospitals. I can do more with an increased budget. Additionally, privatization plan to promote private investments in the healthcare system could allocate extra funds. Is access? Yes, that was one of my promises. I personally promised that our health system were important to our term, and I'll fully support you, Pascal. This is one of the reasons I'm optimistic about the upcoming budget debates. With enough funds, we will be able to build new hospitals and expand the quality of our services. I do hope to create a competition and increase quality of healthcare with the privatization effort. But you must realize that privatizing our healthcare system would increase the price of treatment and make access worse for the average citizen. Besides, it wouldn't fit into the planned economy President Rayne has decided to promote. My expectation for our government is that we understand and focus on the needs of the people. Minister Walda. I bailed out people in need instead of business. Trust me, my plan is correct. There are other significant issues that we need to focus on, like security. You know what? We'll go with a basic one here. We're elected representatives of our people, and we'll prioritize their needs. Reassuring to hear. I don't want to sound cynical, but almost all governments are making the same promises. We must show that we're different through our actions. Did we cover all necessary subjects? There's one more thing. I wish Rayne by concern about your scheduled meeting with the GASM chairman and former president, Mr. Alfonso. By negotiating with Alfonso and his company, you have an opportunity to secure better labor conditions for blue-collar GASM employees. This could be a triumph for all of Narbell. What is there to negotiate, Pascal? The standards of GASM workers are already at rock bottom. President Rayne can and must demand better. Nevertheless, it's worth acknowledging the corporation's significant contribution to job creation in Narbell and other poverty-stricken regions. Persuading the chairman to make concessions might prove to be a formidable task. Okay. Priority lies in improving the economy. Once it's fall, upward mobility will follow suit. I know how slippery he is. He's a little snake. If we do this right, we can find a solution that advances both the economy and the interests of the laborers. That would be quite an impressive feat. You make headlines for it. This matter is close to my heart, and I'd personally be grateful if you were able to resolve the concerns raised by Katrina Horton and her fellow labor representatives. It would be difficult to convince a CEO like Alfonso, giving benefits to workers without him personally gaining from it. Profit off this, considering needs of greater energy security. We might be forced to collaborate with him. We do need energy security. I think that is true. Yeah, I'm going to go with 1 on this one. Remember, these collaborations usually come with strings attached. Often they disproportionately favor corporations while placing the burden on the common people. Thank you for your input, Sierra, but I will stress to President Rayne how important it is that the door of dialogue remains open. Ideology should never get in the way of bringing around tangible, lasting change. You know, I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged by the willingness of Mr. Manager and Mr. Alfonso to meet with me, to step in the right direction. We shall keep you no longer. Thank you both for the discussion. I do hope that we won't repeat the same mistakes again and again. Have a good day, Mr. President. The ministers left, and I prepared to leave the other official business in the city. The council meeting was just one of many events that I was scheduled to attend over the next few days. As I made my way out, the weather was noticeably cold, but it didn't keep a group of USP supporters from coming out to cheer us on the streets. By looking at citizens' attire, it was easy to understand the current state of Narbell. Some people were wearing clothes a few sizes too large. Some kids did not even have shoes. Yet, there's still hope in their eyes. They're excited to see their president in their city. I mean, I'll try to work with Alfonso. I have nothing against him. I mean, we did, you know. Well, what did we even do with Alfonso? We sat on the sidelines. We did not publicly speak out against him. So I think that's got to help us out in some way. Arcasia builds military bases in Lesbia. President Walker visited Lesbia last week to engage in talks with Prime Minister Oliveras concerning the establishment of Arcasian military bases within Lesbia. Following the conclusion of discussion, an agreement was reached between two leaders regarding the significant military defense investment in Lesbia. As part of this agreement, a large military base will be constructed on Ravnos Island. The base will be equipped with Arcasian radar and anti-air systems for enhanced security. Additionally, Arcasia plans to deploy a dozen M3 ballistic missiles. Now this is my lights flashing again. I think maybe like a cat chewed the wire or something. I would not be surprised me at all. CSP leaders discussed Hajland at Helm Summit. At a pivotal meeting in Helm, CSP leaders gathered to address the intricate and historical charge issue of Hajland sovereignty. The discussion... Okay, this is kind of getting crazy. I'm going to at least have it like down so I don't see it flashing too obviously in my eyes. Discussion revisited the Angrolian annexation of the island during Vagland Revolution in the 1920s, emphasizing the Alliance's commitment to addressing historical missteps and securing a future with respect to the rights and aspirations of the island's inhabitants. The summit also highlighted the CSP's strategic ability to navigate an increasingly complex geopolitical environment, shaped by the growing influence of the ATO. Leaders stressed that the critical importance of the dialogue and cooperation to prevent further escalation in a delicate situation surrounding Hajland. Additionally, the CSP confirmed that the contingency plans are in place, ensuring that Vagland, a key member of the Alliance, will receive full support should the circumstances require it. The meeting concluded with a collective affirmation of CSP's determination to uphold peace and stability. Press the button by accident. The leaders emphasized their intention to approach the Hajland issue with a diplomatic but firm stance, addressing its historical complexities while applying the necessary pressure to achieve a resolution that aligns with the Alliance's principles. Okay. What else? Is there anything else on the world stage that we need to look at? It looks like the answer is no. What's going on back at home? What's going on in Narbell? A coal mine has collapsed in Narbell. Emergency response teams are dispatched immediately due to the sheer size of the disaster. Current death toll is at 82 and counting. My goodness. Yeah, we have 3 reports here. Repeal of the Energy Protection Act of 1932 fails. The proposed repeal of the Energy Protection Act of 1932 was put to a vote in the Assembly today, resulting in its defeat. Despite strong advocacy from the reformer faction of the PFJP and beyond, including within the USP under Albin Clavin, the majority of the Assembly, led by the USP and the NFP, voted against repeal 179 to 71. Consequently, the Energy Protection Act of 1932 remains in force, maintaining the status quo in foreign ownership restrictions of energy companies in Sordland. This result concludes the current attempt to modify the foreign ownership regulations, but it does not preclude further legislation efforts or any initiative by the executive. Okay, NFP, they hate it. Completely against any threshold reform. He specifically emphasized that it would lead to unwanted elements entering the Assembly, and that he would outright be against any changes to 10%. I mean, the NFP aren't going to work with us, right? Okay, and the Workers' Right Bill nears completion. The Workers' Right Bill of 1954, proposed by Albin Clavin and supported by Minister of Health Pascal Beniwol, is being prepared for its first draft review. Voices from the labor union showed strong signs of support. A session dedicated to the bill in the Assembly proved contentious. The people that form the backbone of the Swedish economy will finally be fully protected by extensive laws, Katrina Horton said, receiving both cheers and boos. And you are the leader of the union here. Just wanted to check on that. Young Sword member found decapitated. Yestor Police Department has found a decapitated body in an abandoned house where the victim was later identified as Kurg Linke, a high school teacher and member of the local Young Sword Cultural Center. What's the age requirement for the Young Swords? So I feel like, high school teacher and being in the Young Swords, it doesn't really work, but the victim was discovered to be tortured with a hot iron rod before his tongue was cut out. Police suspect the Red Youth are responsible for the incident. Okay, incident was not made public. And what's going on in Narbell? Okay, more strikes against Gossam. Not a surprise. In meeting with Mangier and Alfonso